listening to theoutdoorstation.co.uk.
Welcome to part 2 of the extended podcast recorded at the recent and now world-famous OMM, the original mountain marathon sporting event, which took place at the weekend of the 25th of October 2008 in Borrowdale, Cumbria. Part 1 dealt with the event itself and shared the actual experience of taking part and how it feels. I hope it explained clearly the rules, the kit list, the number of courses, and perhaps indicated the kind of people who enjoy testing themselves, their knowledge and their kit out in these potentially extreme conditions. If you've listened to that podcast, you'll understand that the OMM Mountain Marathon isn't at all like the traditional linear A to Z road marathons, where you have hundreds of runners start, do the same route, and then finish. As you'll hear, the media obviously didn't do their research when this story broke, and it's easy to see how the hysterical drama increased as they tried to put across the idea of losing 1,700 people between A and Z, which, if you thought it was a normal marathon, would be a disaster, if perhaps slightly careless. Yes, on that weekend, the weather was extreme, mainly due to the fact that a month's worth of rain fell in one day. The result was almost 3,000 sodden competitors, a flooded road at HQ at Seathwaite Farm, and on the other side of Honister Pass, a flooded overnight camp at Gatesgarth Farm. Yes, the flooding was more extreme than expected. However, all competitors had watched the forecast and were prepared for those cold, damp conditions on the hills. Sadly, the event was cancelled halfway through on the first day for numerous reasons we will come on to. Those like us who finished the first day's course ended up camping in a newly constructed concrete barn along with 500 others, as the campsite was under 3 foot of water. Many others, we understood, had returned to Seathwaite Farm and the delights of Wilf's Cafe. Others, who were unaccounted for, were presumed to be bedded down either on the hills or elsewhere. There were injuries and accidents, and mountain rescue were called into service on several occasions. The RAF helicopter apparently only flew for just 6 hours. 17 people were injured in various forms, which was unfortunate, but not unusual for an event like this. Certainly much less than one might expect amongst 3,000 people in those conditions. The mood in the cowshed was typically British. Talk of the weather and what a shame. We brewed, ate our food, got into our dry kit and slept on the floor. No panic, no emergency, no fuss. Just the occasional excitement of a balloon bed popping during the night. The following morning, as we walked over Honister Pass back to HQ to collect our cars, we all slowly became aware of some kind of media interest. The odd professional TV camera on the roadside, the occasional overheard comment of, "We made the news last night," and the presence of what appeared to be reporters hovering around Wilf's Cafe. All around the various car parks, mobile phones began rapidly beeping as they were powered up, a very eerie sound. We all started to get text messages on our phones as we retrieved them from the cars. And then we turned on the car radio.
They knew it would be a challenge, but even these experienced trail runners had to take shelter last night from the falling weather.
And the people who were brought down to you, were they physically brought down with stretchers to describe
Some 2,500 runners took part in an endurance race at the Lake District.
Yeah, police say they advised the organisers
when you were of condition where they were you were disappointed, so did you tell that to the race organisers? Did you advise them not to listen? Some people are still missing.
People are still missing, they haven't checked in, and we've got very cold.
And what did they say to you about that? I mean, how would you describe their attitude in rejecting your advice?
What on earth? We had just spent the previous day being battered by high winds and rains, and now we were being hit by an even larger barrage of media headlines. Each one more shocking than the last. We all sat there staring dumbfounded at the radios as they painted a picture of some huge disaster taking place right where we sat.
A dramatic operation to rescue hundreds of stranded runners on a Lake District mountain. Torrential rain, high winds and flooding cause a marathon race to end in chaos.
We've been talking to someone who's been offering shelter to several hundred people who were taking part, and he was criticising the organisers.
So you think they were a bit mad to go out in that sort
More
of
than
weather?
a dozen people were taken to hospital, suffering from hypothermia and minor injuries.
Down in stretchers? Just describe some of the conditions that these people were in when you took them to hospital.
Helped the police and the mountain rescue service search for competitors still missing this
morning.
But
these are the lucky ones. Several hundred of their fellow competitors are still in the hills, apparently stranded.
You must be relieved tonight that you're not actually having to take shelter or indeed are stuck out on the fells somewhere
tonight. Is this
a
major operation for you, or is this something which is easily containable as far as the
Police and rescue teams in the Lake District are trying to account for more than 1,500 fell runners who took part in a race yesterday in appalling
The emergency
weather.
services declared a major incident.
Farmer's barn in the Lake District has become a makeshift
Did you advise them not to?
Some people are still missing.
It was no wonder the car park was filled with text messages arriving from concerned loved ones. Although a lot of criticism has been levelled at the knee-jerk reaction of the BBC for failing to back-check their story and get some facts straight before going live, they certainly are not the only ones guilty of this copy-and-paste media reporting. The written word was no different. Here's some headlines and comments from the general media that weekend. BBC News Online, Saturday the 25th of October. 1,700 unaccounted for. Hundreds of people taking part in a run in the Lake District near Keswick have been stranded by flooding and torrential rain. About 400 people are understood to be sheltering at Gatesgarth Farm. BBC News, Sunday the 26th of October. Thousands of runners who took part in a Lake District endurance race disrupted by treacherous weather are now accounted for, police have said. Mail Online, 27th of October. Floods could have turned mountains into a morgue as marathon runners are stranded. They came from all over the world to run in one of the planet's toughest endurance races. But competitors in this weekend's original mountain marathon in the Lake District got more than they bargained for thanks to some ferocious weather. Organisers were forced to abandon the race with 1,700 of the 2,500 runners stranded on the fells overnight in storm-force winds and a month's worth of rain in 24 hours. Mark Weir, 42, who owns the Lake District's Honister Slate Mine, said his staff helped to bus runners to safety and provide overnight shelter in the tourist attraction cafe. He said, "We have come within inches of turning the Lake District mountains into a morgue." Telegraph, October the 27th. Mountain Marathon Lake District could have become a morgue. The mine's owner, Mark Weir, said the race should never have gone ahead. He said, "We have come within inches of turning the Lake District's mountains into a morgue. We need to learn from it." Mr. Weir said the weather had been like a biblical storm, and the wind was so strong that rain coming down the mountain was blown back uphill. He said the only way to get there right now is by speedboat. Times, 27th of October. Just inches away from turning the mountains into a morgue. Mark Weir, who began a rescue effort on Saturday night from his slate mine near Keswick, said that the race could have led to many lives being lost. "We have come within inches of turning the Lake District mountains into a morgue. We need to learn from this," the 52-year-old owner of Honister Slate Mine said. The tourist attraction was used as a temporary shelter for hundreds of runners who became trapped by the storm. Manchester Evening News, 26th of October. Lake's morgue ordeal escape. Marathon runners have told how they survived a night of drama and weather that threatened to turn the Lake District into a morgue. Neil Gregory and his friend Andy Reid spent Saturday night huddled together with other competitors in a cowshed. As they told of their cold and wet night, it emerged organisers of the endurance event were urged to cancel the race by local people and police. And some members of the public who helped rescue competitors said the incident could have resulted in a high number of deaths. Mark Weir, the manager of a slate mine where 300 runners sought refuge, some suffering from hypothermia, said, "We have come within inches of turning the Lake District mountains into a morgue." North West Evening Mail, 29th of October. Should the mountain runners pay for their rescue? A row has broken out over who should foot the bill for the massive search operation in the Lake District at the weekend. Torrential downpours and 100-mile-an-hour winds left 1,700 fell runners competing in the original mountain marathon stranded in mines, farms and emergency centres on Saturday night. Cumbrian police, mountain rescue teams and an RAF helicopter all played a part in the huge rescue operation. And the cost of responding to the emergency, it is understood, could run into hundreds of thousands of pounds. Now one of Cumbria's top health officials has questioned whether the event organisers should put their hands in their pockets to meet the financial burden on the voluntary rescue teams. It has been claimed that the event should never have gone ahead. Public Health Director Professor John Ashton said the cost of the operation has not been calculated, but it will be enormous. The runners came, they saw, they conquered, and they left the bill. Not just for public services, but also volunteer rescue organisations who struggle to make ends meet. A Cumbrian police spokeswoman refused to level any criticism at event organisers. A similar stance was taken by Michael Mulford, spokesman for RAF Search and Rescue. He said, "Our helicopter flew for 6 hours in total, and that will come off the monthly allocation. It's not like it's cost us any extra. We will always go to alleviate distress. It's never our policy to criticise anyone or tell them what they should or shouldn't do. The fact is, 80 people were reported unaccounted for. We helped get it down to 20 within a few hours. So on that basis, it's a search operation with a happy ending." A-class competitor Charlie Sproson sums up just how shocked we all were.
Yeah, completely. I've been blown away by it. I couldn't believe the over-exaggeration of the amount of people that were missing, and that I've heard mountain rescue teams apparently were out on Saturday night, which I don't think is correct. And I was at a christening yesterday on the West Coast were telling me that there'd been an event centre set up in Cockermouth where people had been shipped to, and I'm not really quite sure about the validity of that. I think that people or the media got things in the wrong place rather than saying that there was, an event centre set up in Cockermouth. It was actually in Buttermere, and we were inside it in that cattle barn. So there's a lot of stories that have been, I suppose, bigged up or blown out of proportion completely, and yeah, I think it's scared maybe people who don't understand what's going on in events like that to a proportion that it should never even have gone.
On the OM forum, it's incredible the amount of people that have sort of made judgments based on the news media, that the information they've received, and everybody is standing by the actual facts, which have very, very little to do with the information that the BBC and co were presenting. The fact they sort of say 1,700 people were stranded. Well, how can you be stranded when you've got camping gear?
Exactly, yeah, that's completely the whole thing. And as far as I understand as well, the mountain rescue teams, from what I'd learned from Mike Parsons on the Saturday evening, was that the mountain rescue teams weren't going out on the Saturday night because they understood anybody who'd been out in those conditions during the day was fully capable of looking after themselves that evening, plus the fact they all had proper kit. You know, we all had tents, we had survival bags, we had sleeping bags, we had dry clothing. Hopefully, if your clothing should have stayed dry, if you were well prepared. Hot food, capability of making, yourself hot food and drinks. So really, surviving a night out on the fells in those conditions with all that equipment shouldn't have been a problem for anybody. I have learned that there was a few people stranded on a little island in the middle of a river, but then should they really have tried to make a river crossing when it was in spate as much as it was? You've got to make your own judgments, and you've got to take personal responsibility. We learned stories of some friends who'd done the event as well, who had managed to walk round from Newlands and came down through Grange and did walk back up Borrowdale Valley and get to Rosswaite where they had a house. And they'd waded through neck-deep water that evening, but they were perfectly fine. And again, they knew what they were doing. So, it's all very interesting.
So it would appear that although the event was flooded out and there had been a few injuries, somehow, somewhere, the press had apparently been fed a line by Mark Weir at Honister Slate Mine. "We are in danger of turning the Lake District into a morgue." And it is possibly this one single comment which started the huge media avalanche. From the initial look at the reports, the headlines and the coverage, not one of them in the professional media world did any research about the OMM to find out what the event entailed, the kind of people taking part, and its history. The assumption clearly made this was a normal linear marathon and that 1,700 people had somehow got lost en route and required rescuing. How ridiculous. Competitor Jeremy Webb made a great little movie that day, and there's a link to it in the show notes. This represents the event and shows what the weather was truly like. However, it was edited completely out of context and played under the news reports, accompanied by the dramatic comments from Mr. Weir. And just how on earth did the BBC get hold of his material?
Yeah, I think what happened was myself and Tim were waiting out a long night back at Race HQ, waiting for the water level to subside so we could drive out. And we kind of realised that what we had in the camera was exactly as you say, is a representation of the race. And we heard that story on the radio, and we thought, well, actually, it might be good to offer this video out so that people can see what actually it was like on the tops. So I contacted the BBC and offered them the video.
Presumably they were keen to have some pictures to go with the audio dialogue they'd been getting so far.
That's right. It was all quite straightforward. The news desk were obviously interested. It was reasonable quality video, so I sort of uploaded it to a website and let them have access to that.
And so how do you feel about the way it's being used? Because certainly the select images that they'd used on the coverage, along with the dramatic reporting or comments made by Honister Slate Mine, certainly seemed to, well, did it in your view give a fair representation of the event?
It's very interesting. I think if you take the pictures on their own, they would never have even been in the news. I think it's the reporting of the event itself that makes the pictures newsworthy. So the pictures themselves don't tell a story. I think, we were absolutely gobsmacked to get back to hear talk of 1,700 lost. I mean, it just didn't seem to make any sense to us, particularly if you know about the event and you know how it works. You wouldn't expect to see people, coming back in their masses. If you try and call something off at 12 o'clock, there's no way of getting communication to people. So how could you confirm that 1,700 were lost? So I think it's a typical example of misinformation, miscommunication, which happens all the time in the news. My next door neighbour is a BBC cameraman, and he is always reminding me that the BBC news is not verbatim. If you need news, you should go and look at many different sources.
Personally, along with a lot of people, I think, at the event, were very concerned, or we received several concerned messages from family and children in our case, who were equally confused about the event, because there's quite dramatic words being used and being supported by some of the clips there, which, as I say, when you see it in its entirety, makes perfect sense and it's very clear. But I just felt it was a bit irresponsible, to be honest, to the BBC to over-dramatise the event, and I didn't feel they had that many facts in there to back up some of the statements they were making. I wonder what your thoughts were on that.
I think that's absolutely right, and actually that's what I like about our footage, is that in no real part of that footage does it seem like there's any real drama. I think myself and Tim looked like we're having another day out on the hill, which we were, and I don't think that it caused that would cause alarm on itself. I think it's the kind of misinformation, miscommunication that caused the stress, and exactly the same thing went through our heads. We realised when we were sitting in a car waiting for the water to go down that this would be making the news, and all our families would be at home, and we couldn't contact them. We had no mobile information.
So would it be true to say you were disappointed the way it was used, even though you were pleased it was on screen? I
don't think I saw that cut of the footage then in that case. I mean, it was used a lot during Sunday, and I was actually giving interviews and stuff to the BBC on Sunday and to BBC World, and I think it ended up on the radio as well. But, I was always defending the event and saying that, they're not Boy Scouts out there, and it's a gnarly event for gnarly people. I'd be quite interested to see how it was cut together with Mr. Weir's comments. Actually, like I say, I didn't see that. I did catch the 10 o'clock news, which used my footage, and there was no mention of Mark in there from what I saw, and it was really just a kind of a more level and balanced view of the event.
And before you ask, no, he didn't get paid for it. To be honest, I was confused as to why Mr. Weir had said some of the things he did, especially as I understood he had also been of great assistance to many competitors during that Saturday. Before we hear from him, let's remind ourselves of just one of his media interviews.
Well, it's ludicrous, really. It's a bizarre day. I mean, we've had some awful rain, and unfortunately, some organisation decided to do a run over the fells on one of the worst days I've witnessed in 42 years.
So you think they were a bit mad to go out in that sort of weather?
Well, I operate a slate mine, and I do the first via ferrata in England, and I cancelled my via ferrata 2 days ago, and I was fully booked this weekend. And I advised the organisers not to do it yesterday and the day before, and now we've got several hundred into the thousands. Stranded, cold, tired, some hypothermic. We've overwhelmed the emergency services. The poor mountain rescue are out trying to find people on the side of the mountain in the dark. It's just a bizarre day.
So some people are still missing?
Some people are still missing. Well, they haven't checked in, and we've got very cold, tired. Basically, I'm right in the middle of it at the moment. If anybody's listening to this, we need buses, empty buses, to come to Buttermere, Gatesgarth, to exit all the runners that are really tired and cold and are sitting in two refuge places we've got. I've mobilised my bus, my Land Rovers, and we're getting them out to the Cockermouth Sheep Centre, and that's going to be the final destination where they can get towels and everything. It's happening now, and I can't get hold of buses to get them on the buses, to get them off this mountain. And if anybody's listening to this, we need buses, because we've got about 1,000 people plus to move out.
How many people are we talking about?
Well, there was seemingly 3,000 entered into this thing, and I reckon about 2,000 went onto the mountains and set about going across the mountains, of which I wouldn't have gone on today.
2,000? Earlier we were told it was 300.
No, we're talking 2,000 people. 2,000. My vehicles are now running people down to Cockermouth. I've set up and mobilised the action centre here, and I'm just on working with it now as we speak.
So what sort of presence is there from the emergency services?
The emergency services are overwhelmed, because it's just the ambulances. The road from Keswick to Borrowdale is now blocked. We're talking 3-4 foot of water. Cars are floating around in the road, on the roadways, so that's totally blocked. So the only way out we can go is via Cockermouth through Lawton and Buttermere, Buttermere and Lawton. So my buses and my Land Rovers are working now. The police have just assured me they're sending some more Land Rovers up so we can get some more people off this mountain. Everybody's soaking wet. People have got, we've got some areas that we're keeping them warm at Honister to keep them nice, and the colder ones we're sending straight down in the vehicles to Cockermouth.
We were hearing earlier that these are supposed to be really experienced, tough mountain walkers and climbers.
Well, I assure you, I'm a helicopter pilot. Yesterday, I put my helicopter in its hangar because of the weather that was ensuing. I cancelled £2,500 of business of via ferrata alone for this weekend because the weather was coming in. This isn't a shock. This shouldn't have happened, and the organisers need shot for it, basically. But that can happen later. At the moment, I'm managing an exodus to the Cockermouth Sheep and Wool Centre, and hopefully we'll get everybody safely from here to there. And if anybody's listening to this and they've got a bus or a minibus, but the air cleaner needs to be high up on the bonnet, because it is, there is a little bit of floods now and again, but it is the way out for these people to get off this mountain.
First of all, I want to say thank you very much for the assistance that you offered to people on the Saturday evening.
Not a problem.
Could you just tell me how things unfolded for you during the Saturday?
What at the start? Well, it started actually 2 days prior to that, because Jen said we might need to use your car park, the organiser, and I asked her what she was doing. It's about that run that we're doing, and I said, I've cancelled the Via Ferrata, and I was fully booked this weekend. Because the weather's going to be really bad. And that was the end of that conversation. And Saturday morning, I had my helicopter engineer, I'd booked him for several months, coming up to fix my helicopter. And Julie was coming up, and my phone rang at about midday, just before midday, and my staff were saying that, look, we've been inundated with runners coming in with hypothermia and with blue lips and cold hands, and what do we do? They're eating and drinking in the cafe. I said, well, it's purely humanitarian, so just let them come in and get themselves warm and turn the heating up. We then, on my way up, because my home is down at Cockermouth, on my way up to Gatesgarth, I looked for Jen and found her. I said, look, Jen, you've got to cancel this event. We're going to be incredibly lucky if we get out of this without anybody being seriously injured or killed, because the weather is maximum. It's freakish weather. And I then continued up to take my engineer to Borrowdale to drop him off at the hangar. And on the way back, I then encountered the river bursting its banks at Sea Toller, and we had like a 6 foot, probably 5 foot by 10 foot wide column of water burst through a wall, which was about 20 foot wide. And then we had these runners walking down the road through this torrent of water, which actually went down the road and broke left back into the river. And I thought, there was nobody there because the river was blocked from Rosthwaite. I'd come through and pushed a car that was floating in the river. I pushed it away from my car, and I was in a big four-wheel drive Land Cruiser, and just got through, informed the mountain rescue that road is now blocked because the cars were floating in it. And then came across this torrent of water just below Sea Toller, then found people trying to walk through it. And I'm thinking they're going to be washed down down into the river if they carry on. So I then stopped and asked them to turn back, because that's really, really dangerous, or take high ground, but don't go down the road, because it's really dangerous. Because it's flash, it can happen in an hour, and it could be gone in 3 hours, you know. And then I went up and I seconded an RAF vehicle, mountain rescue vehicle, asked him to turn his lights on and turn everybody back to the mine, because it was bad advice going back to the start, because that was flooding severely. And already we were full in the mine itself, and there was a bit of confusion. They said, but they've sent it over here. And the amount of people that had already gone down there, I knew, because I've lived down there, we didn't have enough spaces to house them at night. So the only place was to house them at Honister first off to keep them warm, and then Gatesgarth. And then hopefully I organised the Sheep and Wool Centre to take the ones that were serious down to there to a receiving station. So it was a very complex and tiring job, really.
Well, I was down at, I did both. I came to Gatesgarth Farm and then came up to the top of the pass before being turned back by yourself, or one of your operatives there. And it was a bit of a miserable walk for an hour or so to go to the top and then come back down again. Yeah. But there was plenty of space at Gatesgarth Farm for people.
That's right. But the trouble was, you see, I've got 6 phone lines here. They only had one phone line at Seathwaite, and it was constantly engaged because of the weather coming through. So there was no communication between Seathwaite and Gatesgarth. So when they cancelled the event and said go back to the start, they were actually sending people over to an area that was already dangerous and getting more dangerous by the minute. And then I realised that, you know, for those precious few hours, it was getting into a dire situation where people could have been washed down that river quite easily. What I was seeing, people were slipping on. It was just people slipping off the feet in groups of 2 and 3 down the road, which was now the river. And the wall, it's even evident today, there's a 20-foot stretch, the wall's been spread right down the field. There's another 15 feet wall gap where the river actually broke back through and got to the main river again. And at that point, as I was coming back, which is about 2-3 o'clock, it was ridiculous. You know, it was something you didn't want a lot of people going through.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my thoughts are that at 3 o'clock I was there, in fact, walking up the hill to the top of the pass there, and I could see the conditions and I was experiencing them, and I didn't see anybody that sort of needed or was in desperate medical states as regards sort of suffering from hypothermia. I mean, the type of people that take part in this event are all kitted out and mentally alert and aware of what they're doing. So I was surprised that you made comments about people sort of being hypothermic and so on, because there doesn't seem to be much evidence from the people I've spoken to there were many people like that.
Well, possibly, as you were going up here, we had my staff here today have just said that before midday they had some older people sitting here, absolutely couldn't even move the hands to actually help themselves, and they were ushered through into some heat, and we had to move some younger gentlemen to get them to warm up, and then we ushered them off in a four-wheel drive Land Rover and took them down to Cockermouth.
Right.
And they then went on into the hospital and were recovering down there. I mean, we're talking, because you were in the event, we're talking hundreds into the thousands of people. It was just a bizarre day, and it was the blind leading the blind, because once it got to that situation, nobody was familiar with the events that were carrying out down in Seatoller. Nobody knew that the road was actually fully blocked and up to over 3 foot something in the flats in Rothwaite, so you couldn't get anybody or any ambulances up there. The ambulances were trying to get everywhere to pick people up. Our phone was inundated by people wanting ambulances, and that was at midday.
Who was that calling you then?
I don't know, because I wasn't here. But our phone lines were absolutely crammed full. They needed assistance and needed ambulances. Because
I've got all the various information from the police and mountain rescue team, and nothing seems to have come through your sort of contact line. It all seems to have come directly.
Well, I rang the police and said we've got a dire situation, and it's getting worse by the minute at 4 o'clock. I actually didn't get a reply back from the police till after 6:30. So they were inundated and overwhelmed as well. With any facility, we have got 6 phone lines here, and we were using every one of them. And there was more phone calls coming in. It was a real bad situation. And, you know, this is one of those things that can be twisted around. And, you know, I've been here in 42 years. I've been a pilot for 22 years. And I fly to and from work every day. And I'm fully aware with the weather on the ground. I'm fully aware with the weather on the top of the fell, because I've been here physically at Honister Slate Mine, working between 1,200 feet above sea level and 1,800 feet above sea level, all for the last 12 years. So I am fully aware of the predicament that can happen very quickly on top of Honister Pass. And unfortunately, the runners are not akin to that, and possibly they've gone all over the place, but I recognise this has been a very serious problem at that moment in time, and I recognised it, and I asked Jen to cancel this operation, or else it's going to end in tears.
Well, certainly I can understand your concerns if you were talking about Sunday walkers and so on, but you're not talking about that type of person, and you're certainly talking about people who are well prepared and have got, as a standard kit list, everything they would need to deal with those conditions.
What I would say to you is, if that was the case, why did we have 300 people in here at midday?
Well, so the numbers that I'm getting back from people don't indicate that there was sort of 300 coming through. Certainly
well, you weren't here, and my staff were here, and we were totally and utterly overwhelmed by people that were here.
The other thing I notice is that I've seen a lot of the news reports as well, having got back from the event and been studied what the news that came through. I see that you'd been interviewed by, was it local radio, TV?
There's been people ringing up constantly for the last 2 days.
Yeah, and
I mean, this is a major event, and I believe, and I'll stand by it, that this was a bad call to do this event. I mean, I put the life of the public, and I have police, fire, I have people that have walked the mountains that do the Via Ferrata, and some of them are out of their comfort zone on our Via Ferrata. The point is, I'm sure, and I'm quite capable to go onto those fells and go in any conditions, because I've been here all my life. But you and the organised can't guarantee that 100% that everybody, which is quite clear, would be actually akin to this sort of condition, this freakish weather condition that happened, and actually be safe on the fell side. If that was the case, if it was the case, we wouldn't have had a full place, absolutely overwhelming with people at midday in my establishment. They would be out on the fells enjoying it.
Well, I was just wondering the way these things, the story sort of escalated, because you were using quite dramatic terms when you were describing the situation on the news media that I've picked up, mainly the BBC sourced. And it's caused quite a lot of concern and distress with people that were obviously related to those taking part in the event, even though they were partly comfortable that the people were kitted out and knew exactly what they were doing. I mean, this event's been going for 40-odd years in much serious conditions than this, and snow and so on. And people survived.
In your consideration then, John, what would you consider the most dangerous part about what happened on Saturday?
Probably the water flooding the cars down in the car park.
No, that's what you would class as the most dangerous consideration for you, is it?
Yeah. I mean,
water?
I was on the hills, and I was along with everybody else. Yes, it was good, strong conditions. It was certainly challenging conditions. We'd all placed ourselves in circumstances with knowledge and experience we were putting into practice. Those who felt that perhaps it was too much for them did the right thing and withdrew and got themselves down again. But I think the most the most awkward and serious part of it was the flooding of the roads and the ongoing effect from that.
I would actually contest that and say, no, that wasn't the most dangerous part. The water breaking the banks below Sea Toller was dangerous because they were walking through it, and I was advising people to go onto the high ground and go around it. But the most dangerous point about that whole day was the wind. The wind almost doubled in strength when it's pushing over the top of the mountains, and the wind shear that can envelop from that can actually lift a body and carry it several hundred yards. You were right in that zone at that moment in time, and it was pure luck that nobody was blown off the crag at any point in the Lake District on that day for them few hours. Now, that is pure luck. Only last year I cancelled Honister when it lifted 100-pound pieces of stone and put them vertically in a column off the ground.
Well, we'll have to beg to differ on that one, I think.
Well, John, all I can say to you, my friend, I've worked here for the last 12 years, and I made a judgment that day, and I stand by it vehemently. That day, if it had carried on and ensued where it had gone, we could have had deaths on our hands very, very easily, John. I'm all for people enjoying the Lake District, and I'm all for people having these events. But I called off my Via Ferrata 2 days before that and cancelling out £4,000 worth of business because I thought it was unsafe.
Okay, Mark. Well, thanks very much indeed for your time.
It's a pleasure.
As I say, I think we're talking about different types of people doing your Via Ferrata and doing something like this.
Well, I actually contest that. They're exactly the same people. What is happening is it's the blind leading the blind. Some people, 80 people out of 100, I wouldn't contest could go up on there, but it's the few souls that think, well, they're doing it, so I'll do it.
Competitor Lucy Harris was actually at Honister Slate Mine for the duration of that afternoon and is able to paint a clearer picture.
Right, well, we arrived at about 20 to 12 at Honister after we'd come off Dale Head because we decided that the conditions really weren't worth the risk to go along to our penultimate control, so we thought we'd just come back down and head to Honister where we knew that we could get dry and then decide whether we were going to go back and get the penultimate control by a different route, go to the finish or go back to Borrowdale.
So, I mean, at Honister there's obviously the cafe and so on, so did you go in and buy yourself a drink and get some food?
Yeah, we went in and people were buying hot drinks and food and basically getting dry, putting on a dry layer, heating themselves up and deciding what their next plan was.
I mean, at that time when you arrived, I mean, I was thinking that's almost 12 o'clock now. The weather was obviously wet as well as windy. Were there people in difficulty as far as you were concerned, or was it just a case that everybody was just wet?
I think there were a couple of people who were very cold. I think 2 people while we were in there got taken to hospital, but other than that, people were just wet, needed to get in, get some dry clothes on and have a hot drink, really.
Right, all right. And of course, at that stage, I suppose, did you know the event had been called off?
And no, we didn't know until about 1 o'clock, I think, when someone came in and told us.
Right. And then what did you do?
Well, most people headed to Borrowdale. We were sat with a friend and his son, and the friend decided to go and get the car, and so we sat and waited at Honister for him to return.
Right, okay, and so you were there for what, a good 2 or 3 hours, I guess?
Oh, we were there for many hours. We were there till about 5 o'clock in the end, and this is because when our friend got back, he said, well, basically there's no way we're getting the car out tonight. He had an alternative route out. Me and my partner decided, right, we'll go down to Borrowdale. We had a Land Rover that we could stay the night in, and a lot of dry clothes and warm things down there, so figured that was the best way.
Okay, now, can I ask you this, Lucy, because I know that you've done previous KIMS, and I think you said yourself that you sort of had mild hypothermia in the past, so you know what the symptoms are and so on. There's been a lot of stories coming out of Honister, particularly up at the Slate Mine there, that, you know, there were hundreds of people sheltering, and it was, you know, people were in serious conditions, and there was this sort of disaster feel coming out of that particular point. And you were there for 4 or 5 hours, and you were witnessing all this. Would you agree with those sort of comments?
I wouldn't say that there were hundreds of people in a dire state. There were people that were that cold, but not the majority of people in there. The majority of people were just needed to go down to Borrowdale, having come up from Butter and got wet again, and just were in there deciding what the best plan was next and how to keep warm and where to go.
So were you aware that many people intended to stay there the night?
No, I didn't really. Well, we were told that there was a base being set up in Cockermouth with food and things, but we didn't know whether that was actually happening, or I think most people decided just to go back down to Buttermere, where there was the barn and where we were meant to be camping.
And the owner, Mr. Weir, did you hear him sort of being interviewed on television or radio at all, or any comments that he was adding to the situation?
Yeah, on the Saturday night we did manage to get out with the Land Rover. It was just high enough to get through the water. And on Saturday night I heard several comments and things like, he said that he'd advised the event not to go ahead on the Thursday and the Friday, but while in Honister I heard him say, what organisation is this? Well, I don't think it'll be running next year, which contradicts that a bit. You know who we are, how did he tell us to cancel it?
So you got back safe and well. A memorable experience, not one to put you off?
Oh, definitely not put me off. I'll be there again next year. I've got a bit of a thing to do with the arm. I need to complete a good one, really.
It certainly appears there was a very unique void between Seathwaite Farm and Gatesgarth Farm, and this was filled by Honister Slate Mine in more ways than one. It appears the event organisers knew nothing of Mr. Weir's calls to the police, the mountain rescue, the media, and his setting up of emergency rescue centres at Cockermouth, etc., where he shipped, rightly or wrongly, competitors away from the event in buses. Of course, this may have been done with the best of intentions. Let's now turn to the Mountain Rescue Service. Once again, they have been quoted in the media as criticising the event. There's also been a lot of talk about costs and who should pay. So on the Tuesday after the event, I put a call into team leader Mark Hodgson from the Keswick Mountain Rescue for his thoughts on the weekend.
Where do you start to answer a question like that? Huge question, lots of answers. First and foremost, mountain rescue teams very, very, very rarely, in fact, go to extremes not to get involved in making decisions or providing advice as to whether events should go ahead or not. I mean, that's not why we're there. We'll respond to any incident where our assistance required, be that a normal accident from anybody walking to local flooding or whatever. Teams, my understanding is 17 casualties were rescued, all of whom were either competitors or marshals and needed the assistance of the mountain rescue team. My own personal view, and it may be that this view doesn't go with everybody, is that the event should have been cancelled. I know all the competitors are very experienced, and I know they're well equipped, and thank goodness they were, because if they weren't, it would have been a whole lot more serious.
Now, is that based on the weather forecast and the experience of the area, based on obviously the strength of the weather forecast? We all knew it was going to be a serious weather front coming in. or are there some other issues there?
Primarily the weather. I have absolutely no problem with outdoor marathons, mountain marathons at all, to be encouraged totally. And I wish I was young enough to be able to do them, let's put it that way, or the knees were strong enough to be able to do them. It's all about the weather and balancing the risks. And I think the main problem here was either non-understanding or non-recognition of the fact that if the weather was that serious and the valley was flooded, what was the contingency plan going to be? Because that, to me, seems to be where all the problems arisen.
Yeah, and certainly, days after the event, hindsight's a wonderful thing. It's the only thing with 100% clarity. But
absolutely, yeah.
It would appear that that a little bit of water wouldn't have been a big problem, but a month's worth of water overnight, obviously, or during the day rather, puts both the HQ and also the overnight stop in a very awkward situation.
Yeah. I mean, there was flooding on Thursday, and in the Borrowdale Valley and around Seaclade. And my understanding is that the event was being set up with the HQ and what have you was being set up then and suffered as a result of that. But for that forecast to then, that extreme forecast to be there to continue, should have started ringing some alarm bells, and not just reliant on the sort of experience and kit of the competitors.
There are various reports in the news that the organisers were advised for the event not to take place, and that this advice had come from the mountain rescue teams. Do you know anything about this at all?
Certainly we at Keswick, and I'm sure all the other rescue teams are the same, we don't give advice as to whether the event should take place, and we definitely didn't on this occasion. I mean, we're there to deal with what happens after the event, not before.
That sort of the weather issues aside, did you feel that people were experienced and kitted out enough? And I mean, it caused you obviously several call-outs, but was it in proportion with an event of that size?
We've never been called to as many call-outs related to one event, and that is a fact. The kit that people were carrying a lot better than some of the people go up to on non-event type issues, certainly, and the experience a lot better as well. But those I mean, my waterproofs, brand new waterproofs, and I was soaked to the skin within very short time after getting out and setting off at the fells from Honister. So whilst people had reasonable equipment and very good equipment, none of that equipment was up to my experience and the views of the type of situation that people got into. None of that equipment was up to the conditions.
Well, I think most people would probably agree with you that they were slightly damp at the end of the day in some form or other.
I mean, having said all that, when we were out on the fells and we were picking up the casualties we were doing, I was relishing the conditions. I like to be out there. I like to get tested and in the conditions and enjoyed it. I mean, I wasn't out for anything like as long as some of the competitors, I have to say.
I suppose, I'm trying to ask between the lines, really, whether you and your teams were annoyed to be called out for something like this, or you were okay about it, because there's been a lot of comments on the different forums and news media, some of which have been very ill-informed, that it was a complete waste of your time and the event shouldn't have taken place, and so on and so forth. That's probably the question I really want to ask you.
Certainly not annoyed to be called out. It is very rarely we're annoyed to be called out, and even if we are annoyed to be called out, we don't publicise the fact. If somebody needs us, we'll go. I am surprised the event took place. I understand the difficulties that you would have been going through the organisers' minds, because they must have been thinking about calling it off on Saturday morning. But if you've got 2,500 people on the start line that travel from all over the country, and they're all raring to go, you're not going to be very popular if you actually call it off there and then.
Yeah, it's a difficult call, isn't it? It's a difficult call. But I mean, as far as the competitors who are going to be listening to this, and they're listening to your comments because they're aware that the activities that took place did involve, the involuntary calling of your services in whatever way that you got the message. I suppose we all want to know that we're not in your bad books as a result of it, really.
No. I mean, and we're only too happy to be able to help. And, it's a testament to the skills of the guys in the 5 different rescue teams and the helicopter pilots, I have to say, who were flying that seeking in the most extreme conditions on the Saturday to get the folk off the island on the Wasdale side. Nobody's annoyed. A bit surprised the event went ahead. But, I mean, what I would say is that the day escalated really quite quickly for us. We got the first call at about 11:45 a.m. to 2 hypothermics above rig headquarters, above Rosswaite. We'd sent the first 8 team members off to that. Within 15 minutes, we had another call that we had 3 other casualties. And at that point, I said, well, Keswick team can't deal with all this. We need help. So we called in Cockermouth, we called in Penrith, and RAF Leeming Mountain Rescue team, who were based at Ullswater, they were also tasked to come and help. So very quickly we got 70 people there, and all of them were used. So quick response from all the team members, and I'm grateful for the team members and the other teams supporting Keswick as they did. Wasdale were already busy doing what they were doing on their side.
Well, as I say, I think everybody that's obviously aware of your involvement, and certainly through the forum, there's been some good donations going towards the mountain rescue, and we all feel very grateful that the service and the volunteers are there.
Last time I looked, it was top 3,000, I think, which is fantastic, and thanks on behalf of all the mountain rescue teams for that.
Well, I think that's the least we can do. One thing I'd like you to clear up for me, if you would, again, back to sort of news reports that were bandied around the media that none of us were aware of until we got back and started looking at depth at some of the comments and the way it had been reported. It implied that you guys, I mean, as a generalisation, the mountain rescue teams were out late in the evening, hunting for people to bring them down off the hills. I find this hard to believe, but was that actually the case?
No, we weren't. The Keswick team certainly weren't. The Penrith team weren't. The RAF Leeming team weren't. I know Cockermouth were involved a wee bit later than Keswick. They were there. The casualty, I think it was a marshal, scale post coppice sort of area they were dealing with. I am unaware of any mountain rescue team searching for anybody overnight. And to be honest, if I'd been asked to go out and search for people, given those extreme weather conditions, I would have been really hesitant about sending the team out anyway, because to find them would have had to trip up over them.
Right. So I suppose what I'm saying is you didn't release any information to the press to say that the teams were working overnight to bring people down to safety.
No, I didn't.
Once again, the facts coming directly from the people involved with the weekend are starting to paint a completely different picture to the one created by the media. Obviously, the last word needs to be with organiser Mike Parsons. Let's start with a question that everyone who wasn't there seems to be asking and talking about. If the media reports are true, why did the event go ahead?
The facts of the matter is that the decision to run the event is based on a number of parameters. One is the nature of the course. The police don't know that. 2 is the nature of the equipment that is being carried. That is very relevant. The police don't know that. 3 is the nature of the experience. People, for the police are not in a position to be able to advise us. They do not have the information, and they don't pretend to. All matters off the road are dealt with by the mountain rescue. The mountain rescue did not say this should not be run. And as a matter of fact, we had at least 6 people participating, starting, using sound managing judgment to depart from the start, who were in fact mountain rescue people. One of those, at least, was from the Cockermouth Mountain Rescue Team.
Right, that's nice and clear. Excellent. At what point was the decision made for the event to be cancelled?
This was sometime probably just before 2. At that point, it was not one factor, but an accumulation of factors, yeah? The camp was getting pretty serious. The water was backing over the road at Gatescarth, flooding the farmyard. The lake itself was extending further back than than in memory, and you could actually see the lake from the back of the farm, which is normally not possible. Jen, to ensure a greater deal of robustness for the event, had in fact got small cabins taken in there for the timekeeper, one for each of the 2 different cabins for the timekeeper to work in, and each operating off a small portable generator. But those areas were also getting flooded so that you could barely get to them. So we started to shift operations so that we shifted into the barn, which we had tried previously and prior to the event to obtain permission for use of a newly built barn, which was incomplete with outdoors and new concrete. Under the stress of an emergency situation, the farmer said, "Okay, that's fine." Yeah. Oh, shortly after that, Jen made the decision to stop it because there was just too many factors. She was getting calls on the Rainette line that I think one of the teams had, the Cockermouth team had to be called out, and so on. And then there was just a build-up, and an accumulation of accidents. And Jen said, "I think the safe thing to do is to call this." So after a period, then she arranged for Wilf's backup base to drum up the same food that would have been used for Sunday in any case, yeah? And have that ready.
Okay, and so she was obviously get people then into the finish area and then straight over the hill, which is what happened to me. Now, I suppose unbeknown to you, or unbeknown to Jen at the time, was of course that the farm on the other side was starting to fill up with water as well, which obviously muddied the situation a bit.
Well, no, we didn't. We were aware of that, yeah, that it was flooding and so on. And what we tried with difficulty to communicate to you at base was that flooding was taking place in Seathwaite and so on, and that you could probably sleep in your cars and there will be some busy places in the barn and so on and so on. No, we were aware that was flooding. The police, however, work on roads, and we're starting to decide that the pass should be closed because people couldn't get through beyond Rosthwaite. And as you guys started coming back down the hill, the message I was picking up, either from competitors coming back down or from somebody on the emergency line, was that the police were stopping it because the water was neck high and the car had overturned in the road in the floodwater. Now, as I'd just been over there, I was quite surprised by that because I couldn't quite understand how that could have happened. It materialized later that what they were meaning was, everybody's assumption is that if you're using a road, you wish to drive through Borrowdale and up through Rosthwaite. And the flood was through Rosthwaite was impassable, except by Mr. Weir from the Honister, who had this super high 4x4. And he was driving both ways.
Now, this is where it starts to get a bit muddy now, because I've spoken to Mark Weir, and he seems to have taken it upon himself at sort of, I don't know, midday onwards to get involved with the event and talk as if he's part of the organisational team, and yet it was the first time I think you guys had been aware of his involvement, even though you'd invited him to get involved with the event from the very beginning. He hadn't actually been party to anything.
No, in fact, he did not wish to be part of it. He made it clear by not returning any calls at all prior to the event. He refused to... he was invited, like all locals are, to participate by providing services. It's a tourist area. People like to get some business here. So we always like to make sure people have these opportunities. He was invited to supply the beer on the bar on Friday night. He just wasn't interested at all. And just showed no interest whatsoever in any involvement and so on.
But I understand that, because I know that just watching the forum during the week, Jen was looking to explore the idea of parking, presumably at the top of Honister Pass there as an option for people, and he wanted to charge an exorbitant price to be involved in this.
Yes, indeed, that's right. Jen did ask and say, could we use your place for emergency parking and so on? And Jen thought that he was asking an exorbitant and unreasonable fee by wanting to charge us £5 per car. That wasn't supposed to be for an overnight. It was just some sort of overflow at any point, yeah?
I mean, he's certainly been very vocal on the media coverage, and he does seem to use the word "we" an awful lot when he's talking about the event and what's been going on, and his explanation and understanding of people being in difficulty doesn't seem to ring true with any of the people I've spoken to who took part in the event, that I witnessed, that I was on that road and I went to the top and I came back down again and I met everybody else obviously in the process of doing that. I found no one in the state that he begins to describe in some of the news reports. And I just wonder if in your view that his addition to the media has driven it into some kind of frenzy, which actually was something that never occurred. It was never in that situation in the first place.
Yes, when I got back to base on Sunday, I was able to sit in the Rainet and handle all the media calls together with our marshal who had been in the cafe there. And he was a very careful, softly spoken guy, taking his words very carefully. And he said, at a certain point when the race was called, he stood up and announced to the people in there that the race is off. And within 20 minutes, suddenly found that, unbeknown to him, his announcement had been videoed. He doesn't know by who. It could have been by a competitor, perhaps unlikely, I don't know. But put it this way, within 20 minutes he found himself watching the television within the cafe, seeing himself announcing the calling off the race. And that really sort of quite astonished him. And so we began to perceive that even if a competitor had taken that video, to be uploaded it needs a touch of know-how, as you know, Pop, yeah?
Yeah, and plenty of equipment that you're not carrying in a rucksack.
Quite. Good point. That does lead us to the next point, doesn't it, yeah? It's our assumption that was facilitated quickly, and, well, under normal circumstances and so on, well, there's no harm in that of itself. But our interpretation is that at this point, Mr. Weir had changed. He certainly changed his attitude. And for a period on Saturday, he was extremely negative, calling Jen and trying to say that competitors going in there and taking advantage and so on. Jen said, sorry about that. Would you please, therefore, feed them something at my cost? I'm not prepared to pay thousands of pounds, but make sure they get a bit of extra cup of tea and a bit of extra food. Don't charge me thousands. Just do it at my cost, yeah? But At a later point, it would appear that Mr. Weir's attitudes changed. From being totally negative and possibly of danger to his business, he suddenly realised that this was a golden opportunity to publicise the further opportunities for business ventures in Honister Quarry. One of which he's publicising is, well, all of these people are not good enough, and there should be here a permanent adventure training centre. And this is the information coming out through the newspaper, and I hear today that he has hired a PR person to handle it all.
Without trying to cast too many aspersions, but trying to stick to the facts, it would appear that although he wasn't keen to be involved in the event in any shape or form at the beginning, it would appear that he's got on board the media, shall we say, network, that he obviously had a direct feed to the media and was able to release as much information about his activities as possible, as at the same time implying the event wasn't well run.
Exactly. Cumbria, like many other outdoor locations where we run an event every year, is a telecoms black hole. But there was just one hotspot in the whole area, and that was Honister. And this is where the whole story picked up. In my opinion, Mr. Weir owes the relatives of the competitors an apology for winding up the media. He is entitled to his opinion that he stated, which the police have said is an overstatement. He said that this area of the lakes is a paradise on a good day, but this is hell, and with all those people around, this could turn into a morgue. Now, that is irresponsible. Any responsible person dealing with any sort of thing going on and so on would know clearly that that is irresponsible alarmism.
Well, I can certainly comment on that on a personal level, because my daughters caught some of the news clips and heard that statement, and along with many other people I notice have commented on the forum, began to become worried, even though they were confident in their heart of hearts that we knew what we were doing, that something beyond, well beyond this type of experience, something terrible had happened, and they began to get worried. So I certainly feel that that the story started somewhere, and it would appear that it started there, and the BBC have also possibly failed in their duty to cross-reference their information and get the right information and give balanced reports, which has done, well, obviously in one respect it's given the event a lot of publicity. The sad part is it's given tainted the organisational experience of 41 years of the event, and tainted it with a bad brush, which I think is unfair, incorrect, and as you quite rightly say, I think he owes all the competitors and their families an apology for perhaps expanding the truth somewhat.
Yes, it was quite over the top. I'd like to talk for a second, Bobby, if I may, about our organising team. You know, many of them have been both competitors, they've been course planners, they've been location finders, and done all sorts of jobs over the years, yes. So we have a very experienced team. We have people who are ex-RAF Mountain Rescue. We have mountain rescue people amongst the personnel. And we have established procedures which ensure that we know that we can keep tags of people and it's the right safety. But life being as it is, people do assume that there is always instantaneous contact, text, email, phone, etc. to everybody, everywhere. Of course, on the website over the years, we've developed clear communications, and people are setting out there to be isolated anyway, of their own choice, yeah? So, when the situation was inflamed by those statements, yeah, then we did not have a communication system able to deal with the world's press piling in. What do I mean by the world's press? I got back just after 7 on Sunday morning. I spent the whole morning doing interviews as the water cleared. The press were piling in. The BBC, about midday, they were going through, and she said, well, hang on, you mean... And she was correcting some facts. So she said, well, there's no story then. And I said, no, not really. Of course we still have people out on the hills, but that's normal. They're looking after themselves. Oh, everybody's poised coming to see the disaster. And the disaster wasn't there. This has gone around the world. And in fact, the stats right now are that there have been 2,000 articles written. This morning, at least the 7 major newspapers carried the story in print. Yeah? We had on our own website 50,000 unique visitors. At some cases, we can see from the record that there was a queue of 200 people on many occasions, yeah.
And do you feel that a reasonable percentage of those stories that are now, if nothing else, now coming to the fore today on Monday, are actually factually based and have got the story right, or are they still repeating the same misinformation?
I probably have done about 20, 25 interviews, yeah, since yesterday. Some interviewers, the ones who are accustomed to interviewing aggressively politicians or civil servants, they really are not that interested in facts or information, yeah? They are always interested to just sort of be seen as putting people on the line and so on, yeah? So some of the people I spoke to, some of the media, were interested to evolve the story and get a clearer picture over, and some weren't. What I have had, and this is the really, really heartening issue, is such a lot of support. If there weren't that, with the pressure of the media, if there were not such an amazing support from the competitors, verbally, handshakes, emails coming in, offers of things, can we do something to turn around this really serious misperception by the press of what we, as outdoor people and the event, is all about. If we can help, we're ready and willing.
Well, Mike, as a competitor, and with my other foot in the media camp, recording the event and trying to give a balanced view of what it's like to take part in something like this, which has turned, for the reasons we've discussed, into something beyond its original challenge. I would just like to say to you, I totally agree with everything that you've already been told, and I certainly have seen many comments in their hundreds on the forum of support, and all of us, all the competitors. I haven't seen one crossword from a competitor. I haven't seen or experienced or witnessed or overheard anybody in the cattle shed overnight, all 500-600 of us, and people I met on the road with a negative word to say about the decisions that were made and the event itself. So I think on behalf of all the competitors and everybody who took part, I'd just like to say thank you very much indeed for all your efforts, and we're probably all truly sorry that it has developed into something beyond your control at the time, and you've had to deal with the stress and the concern of the media outcome. But as far as we're concerned, I'm sure we will all be back next year.
Thank you so much, Bob. You don't know how much I appreciate that.
And one other thing, Mike. Let's not have it in the lakes. This is an extended podcast, and I hope it hasn't been too long. However, I wanted to balance the negative, ill-informed reports in the general media with direct interviews with those concerned, all of whom have now given their views. Certainly, things were said in the media that weekend which caused an immense amount of distress at the time. This was very unhelpful and unnecessary. The over-dramatised media message, combined with the flooding and a few injuries, created a momentum which elevated the situation into a major rescue operation by the services. Honister Slate Mine appears to be at the centre of all this, and although they provided shelter and assistance to many, confusion still reigns over who made key decisions and why. The fallout will continue for some time to come, I'm sure. I've called the BBC on several occasions this week, both in Cumbria and London, for a statement to justify their exceedingly poor reporting standards to include within this podcast. I was deflected each time to the press office, who wanted notification as to specific reports which they could comment on. They apparently couldn't or wouldn't understand that the reports were all inaccurate in some form or other and have since failed to reply. You may consider that the event was overtaken by circumstances beyond its control, the weather, the media hype, and local forces working against them. You may feel the event didn't make the right contingency plans to cope with the forecast serious weather at 2 locations. Whatever you feel, do keep one eye on this story in the media, and please contribute with the facts whenever you can. As I finish this podcast, a week on from the event, the media are still copying and pasting the original incorrect information around the world and perpetuating the drama, increasing the fear for this type of future competition. If we don't present the facts, there's every likelihood that future mountain marathons won't allow us as competitors the same freedom to race and be self-reliant, which we've all been very happy to enjoy for these last 41 years with the OMM.
This independent programme is produced and hosted by theoutdoorstation.co.uk.